So I got interested about longevity a couple of weeks ago, mostly because it's becoming such a trendy topic lately. And so I started wondering, are there actual secrets to living longer? What I found is that there's a mix between unrealistic but solid science protocols and a lot of pseudo science, which honestly is not so convincing advice. Then I came across the book Ikigai, which is based on the research of Hector Garcia and Francesc Miralles in Okinawa, Japan, which is a region known for its higher number of centenarians. And the book breaks down the habits and the mindset of Japanese people living over 100. And in this video, I'm going to share the 5 most important and I think applicable rules I took from the book. So the first rule is to eat until you're 80% full. Let's just start with the diet that these people living in Okinawa have. The most important thing is that they're eating a very non-processed diet, and that's, if not surprising, very important to highlight. The second thing is that they tend to eat very little meat, so it's rarely something that happens. They're most of the time vegetarians, or they eat fish 2 or 3 times per week, and coupled with tofu, which is their favorite source of protein. They tend to eat a lot of vegetables, a lot of potatoes, a lot of sweet potatoes to be exact, and a lot of rice too. And they grow their own crops. And so they all have this garden in the backyard to be able to produce their own vegetables. A big chunk of their diet comes from these vegetables that they grow themselves. The second thing, which is really important, that ties a little bit more to the rule, which is to eat until you're 80% full, is that food is considered fuel and not a source of instant gratification. Now, there's something in the West that happened is that with the marketing and the fast food companies and the supermarkets and everything else, food has become more of a liability. I talked about it in the previous video. And so for the Okinawans, food is really considered something that you need in order to function properly. But it's not something that you can abuse. It's not something that you can take advantage of when you want to feel a certain way. Food is not something that you use if you want to feel better after whatever it is, a rough day, a breakup, you call it. The thing is that if you generalize this and make it broader, the teachings from the book is to learn to enjoy life, but don't let the pleasure take over. Again, something that applies a lot to nutrition, but a lot more to other areas of the life. And so it's this thing that we are not supposed to kind of take advantage of the stuff that's around us, because in nature, it is something that has a limit. It's finite resource. So for example, food, you cannot, stuff yourself because you're not 100% sure that you're going to have enough food for the rest of whatever, the day, the week, the year, so on. And it's to really kind of treat the nature itself and the stuff that we take from nature as something that's really valuable, something that you cannot overuse whenever you want because you want to acquire more pleasure. So overeating will just not make any sense when you're taking care of your own garden, when you're producing your own vegetables. The second rule is about finding a group of people that shares the same value as you do. It's to have a community surrounded with and have people you can turn to when something happens or when you need support. So it's a support group, a social system that's been established, and Okinawans know a lot about this because for them it's really important to cultivate this group of friends that you're hanging out with. And they even use money. So each member of the group sends money to the group every month, and they kind of fund the activities that they're going to be experiencing and sharing. And in that case, it's really something that's quite fascinating because they use money as a means to get together and to participate in activities. People don't work so that they can buy more stuff. People work so that they can use the money in order to get together and have fun. And it's really something that I think we should prioritize more. I think this is really something that's extremely important, especially with the isolation crisis and the social anxiety crisis that's around us in North America. And I think that tends to be because people are not participating in activities together. People are locked in their houses, especially after COVID that's been like aggravating everything. So what I can draw from this is to, build a group of friends, ask people if they want to be part of your social group and if they want to hang out 1 or 2 times per week. And if they want to fund activities by just sending a little money here and there. This is really something that's important as something that helps people live over 100 because they feel supported, they feel the community around them, and they feel like whatever it is that they're going to be facing, they still have this group of friends and the people they're going to play cards with. Third principle is about work, and it is to never retire. People in Okinawa almost never retire, because I think that in Japanese, they don't even have the same word when it comes to retirement, because they have a very different relationship to work, and they treat it as something that's meaningful and that brings them a sort of meaning, a sort of a sense of purpose of whatever the endeavor is. There is this idea in North America that the only goal in your life is to work until you can retire so that you can be free and do whatever you want. And I've always thought that this idea was honestly garbage, because what is it going to be? Are you going to suffer and undergo your own reality because you don't like the work that you're doing for 40 years just so that you can retire at 65? Or are you going to kind of find something that brings meaning and purpose to your life, even if it doesn't bring most money, and be happy and still want to work even when you retire, or participate at least in the work that you were doing before? Now, it is true that they have different jobs. They don't have 9-to-5 office jobs from what I've seen in the book. They don't engage as much in mindlessness. So they don't have these kind of very draining, very inactive, very sedentary jobs, which puts them in front of a computer screen for 8 hours plus per day. They just don't seem to engage in those kind of activities. They want to engage in meaningful work, something that teaches them something they can help people with, and see the outcome of the work kind of directly with their own eyes. And so linked to that, there's this sense of using flow activities. So if you don't know flow, it deserves its own video, because this concept is really key in order to find happiness and probably longevity. But it's to engage in those activities in which you can kind of lose yourself, because you do them so well that it kind of flows and you're kind of so at ease with whatever it is that you're doing, but it's challenging enough so that you can progress and feel like you're really kind of reaching another level. And this kind of idea that you need to engage in flow activities is really something that's present in the lives of Okinawans living over 100. And then if we talk about in the book, I think it's the authors, but probably the people, even they have words for this to describe it. It's something they engage in, which is called microflow activities. So microflow activities can be anything that's not so productive, like cleaning your kitchen or gardening or whatever it is, but that can still put you in this kind of intense state of presence and usefulness. For example, they talk a lot about gardening because all the people that they've interviewed had their own garden and grew their own vegetables, or at least a part of it, to sell them to the market and then buy other people's stuff. Now, the fourth idea is to choose your own stressors. Stress causes most health problems, and it's something that's known in the West too, but not so talked about. And so they have this idea that little stress is good because it pushes you to act and mobilizes your body and your mind. But too much stress is very detrimental, and it, in fact, is going to be a factor for the opposite of longevity. You're going to die early if you're stressed out. But it's this idea that you should choose whatever you're stressed about, because life is stressful, of course, and there are going to be stressors in your life. But the thing is that you can choose these stressors. And if you don't want your job to be a source of stress because you have too much of it, or you want to dedicate your energy and your well-being to another endeavor, and it is stressful and you can't bear the stress at work, then switch your job. And this idea that you need to choose your own stressors and that you can build your life with different types of activities that have different levels of stress is really something that's key to the life of Okinawans. More than that, it's just the awareness of how much they're stressed and how much their body responds to the stress that they're encountering. And it's something that we're not discussing enough, even though stress is literally killing your cells and making them age way faster than it's supposed to. And when it comes to stress, something that I thought was a really good idea is called negative visualizations. And it comes from Stoicism. And I learned in the book that Stoicism and Buddhism, if I'm not mistaken, are really close to each other. And there's like ancient ways of thinking about, in this particular case, emotional regulation and emotional awareness. And so negative visualization is something that's used a lot. And it's this idea that you can imagine the worst that could happen so that you're prepared when certain pleasures are taken away from you. So it's this idea that you can cultivate kind of this negative visualization maybe on a daily basis, I don't know, and imagine that this thing that you really like can be taken away from you whenever life wants, so that you can one day be prepared when this is really taken away from you. And it can work with the people around you, can work with the stuff that you have, can work with the kind of your health and your ability to move freely and to be in good shape. It could be anything, and I really thought that this was a great way to prep yourself to the loss that's ahead and to regulate maybe the stress better. And the last point is obvious, but it needs its load of attention, and it's to move every day. Now, there's a nuance here. And when I researched about this topic and I found out, for example, the book of Peter Aitia, this idea that you need the perfect combination of cardio work, of muscle stimulation, and I thought that this was a mouthful and this was way too much for people that weren't into science or into longevity or that hadn't researched the topic before. So with Okinawans, it's very simple. It's to move every day. Whatever it is that you're doing, it doesn't have to be high intensity. It's low intensity, but it's a lot of activity at the end of the day. They're walking a lot. They're gardening a lot. They're just moving, just getting up and down all the time. It doesn't have to be so complicated as to have this perfect combination of strength work and cardio work and getting lost in this sea of information that's out there when it comes to exercise. Just move every day. Walk every day. Garden every day. What it is that you're doing, the environment and the climate around you allows you to. They don't have sedentary lifestyle. That's basically it. They don't have sitting in front of a computer or on the couch looking at a phone screen for like 4 hours. To just move around like humans have been designed for. And this is something that's really important, especially when it comes to longevity, because it's something you need to implement in your lifestyle. Just movement in general. Doesn't have to be a sport. And so they're really fond of two things mostly. It's called Qigong and Tai Chi. And those two practices are highly relevant when it comes to moving more. It's very low intensity. It's very slow movement, if I'm not mistaken. And it's almost always pairing breath with exercise, because they tend to see movement as this kind of combination between the body, the mind, and the breathing. And so those are the main roles when it comes to Okinawans and people in Japan living over 100. And so I really hope this helps. And tell me what you thought about this video. In the meantime, trust the process.